Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Clark Egner, Director of International Programs at the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission. And today's session is designed to help you think strategically about the West Virginia Ireland Education Alliance, RFP, what the initiative is intended to accomplish, how the two funding categories differ, what we're looking for in terms of strong proposals, and how to assess where your institution fits at this stage. So over the past several weeks, I've had the opportunity to talk with many of you individually and in smaller groups. And one thing that's become very clear to me is that institutions are approaching this from very different starting points. And that's exactly what we expected. Some partnerships are already taking shape, while others are just beginning to explore what's possible. So my goal this morning isn't to convince everyone to submit the same kind of proposal. It's to help each institution to identify the path that makes the most sense for its own readiness, capacity, and long-term goals. So the initiative isn't simply a one-time grant program. It was established through House Bill 4087, which provides a recurring annual appropriation of $250,000. Okay. Is there someone with an email DCROU01 in the house? I can't tell. Okay, you must, for some reason, you're one of the presenters. I don't know how that happened. Maybe I made you a presenter by accident. So, okay. I'm sorry to interrupt. So anyway, this bill provides a recurring annual appropriation of $250,000. And that matters because it signals the legislature's commitment to building long-term relationships between West Virginia and Ireland rather than funding a single round of projects. The purpose of the alliance is to strengthen academic, cultural, and workforce connections between West Virginia and Ireland. While this first RFP focuses on faculty-led study abroad and partnership development, the broader vision is to build durable institutional relationships that can grow over time and create benefits for students, faculty, institutions, employers, and the state. State-level investments of this kind in international education are relatively uncommon. If any of you, for those of us who work in this field of international education, I think you're aware of that. And it's worth recognizing, if not worth celebrating. And it gives us an opportunity to build something that can continue to mature well beyond the first funding cycle, which is not typical. Usually it's a one-time funding and then we're expected to sustain it. But in this case, it's intended to be recurring funding. So what does success look like? Well, I want to be clear about this up front because it shapes almost everything else I'll say today. Success is not measured by how many applications we receive. Success is building a healthy statewide ecosystem of partnerships operating at different stages of readiness and development. And that portfolio includes implementation projects, development projects, institutions intentionally building toward a future proposal, and institutions that are simply observing the first round to learn what's involved before deciding whether and how to participate. Every one of those is a legitimate place to be. So if we finish this funding cycle with institutions spread across the entire spectrum, I would consider that a successful outcome. So So one question that I've asked I've been asked several times is, if we're not ready this year, are we missing our opportunity? The answer is no. The initiative was intentionally designed as a phased multi-year effort, not a one-time competition. The partnerships that emerged this year are intended to become the foundation of a statewide portfolio that continues to grow and mature over time. That means institutions will enter the portfolio at different times and from different starting points. Some will launch implementation projects immediately, beginning to 2027. Others will spend time building partnerships and institutional capacity before they're ready to do so. So they may not start sending students until 2008 or after. So the important point is that this first funding cycle is the beginning of a longer process, not the end of one. Okay, so what I'm hearing, what I'm about to share comes from conversations I've had with institutions across the state over the past several weeks. It's not a formal survey, but it does reflect some clear patterns that are beginning to emerge. Institutions are responding in genuinely different ways. Some are already moving towards implementation. Some are building partnerships and refining ideas, and others are still working on whether and how this initiative aligns with their institutional priorities. Taken together, those conversations reinforce something I've been emphasizing from the beginning. Institutions are entering this initiative from different starting points, and that's exactly what we'd expect. The current shape of the portfolio right now, we have multiple partnerships in active development across several regions of the state, spanning both funding categories. Several additional institutions are exploring or evaluating opportunities. And I'm not going to identify specific partnerships today because many of those conversations are still evolving, and I don't want to get ahead of institutions that haven't publicly committed to a direction. One exception is the Marshall Bridge Valley Dundalk partnership. Brian Hoey, Dean of the Honors College, Professor of Anthropology at Marshall, and Jason Spencer, Professor of STEM Technology at Bridge Valley, have generously given me permission to reference their work because it provides an excellent example of how a partnership can mature over time. And we will hear from Jason Spencer in just a few minutes. But the point I want you to take away is this. There is real momentum that exists across the state at multiple levels of readiness. Okay, so this next section is the heart of today's conversation, and by now you've probably started thinking about your own institution. Some of you already have partners identified and proposals beginning to take shape. Others are still working through ideas and asking, what the right next step looks like. So over the next several slides, I'd like to give you a framework for thinking about those questions. We'll look at development and implementation as points along a continuum rather than two separate destinations. We'll walk through a self-assessment example, talk about what success looks like in each category, discuss why development is substantive work in its own right, and finish by looking at what reviewers are actually rewarding in strong proposals. So implementation proposals are eligible for up to $50,000 and are intended for partnerships prepared to begin delivering concrete student, faculty, or partnership activities during the grant period, with initial activity expected in 2027. Development proposals are eligible for up to $25,000 and are intended for partnerships focused on relationship building, institutional coordination, and the capacity needed for future implementation. So here's one sentence I'd like you to remember. A proposal that demonstrates a credible development pathway is evaluated just as competitively as a proposal that's ready for implementation. Neither is a fallback. Please don't choose implementation because you assume development looks weaker on paper. It doesn't. Okay, let me give you three quick examples of self-assessment questions, and you can see kind of gauge where you fit, where your institution fits in this. First, you have this is the first example. You have a strong administrative support and a confirmed CTC partner, but no clear faculty lead yet. That can absolutely become a strong development proposal, but only if you can demonstrate a credible pathway to academic ownership. Who do you plan to approach, as far as developing that academic ownership? Who do you plan to approach? What department or discipline makes sense? How will you engage a faculty champion during the grant period? You would really have to make a case in your proposal if you don't currently have a faculty champion and an academic area that wants to take ownership of this. You will need to make a case for this in your proposal and demonstrate that you have a credible path towards accomplishing that. The administrative and CTC pieces are an excellent start if you're a four-year university, that is, but they aren't the whole picture yet. Second example, you have one enthusiastic faculty member with a personal Ireland connection, but little institutional support beyond that person. So in this case, you might not want to consider applying if you can't get the support from your leadership. The next step may be building support at home internally before building a partnership abroad, because one person's enthusiasm is valuable, but it isn't institutional readiness yet. And institutional readiness is what we are going to be looking at. Third, you have prior pilot experience. You've done faculty-led study abroad programs, possibly to Ireland before. You have faculty prepared to lead again. And many of the academic and logistical pieces are already in place. That's probably closer to an implementation proposal. So think about where you fit in this self-assessment. As I've met with institutions across the state over the past several weeks, I've encountered situations that look very much like each of these. The goal isn't to fit a particular category. It's to recognize honestly where your partnership is today, what is your current capacity, build the strongest proposal from that starting point. Okay, if you're thinking about development, what does success look like? For development proposals, by the end of the project, we're generally hoping to see an identified Irish partner, confirmed or in development. Faculty relationships have been established. Exploratory visits completed. Curriculum conversations and planning are underway. Institutional coordination structures are emerging. Partnership agreements, MOUs are in progress. A credible roadmap towards future implementation activity. So taken together, those are the kinds of outcomes that tell reviewers a partnership has made meaningful progress, even if it isn't delivering a faculty-led program yet. So there's one additional point I want to clarify because it's easy to misunderstand. During this first funding round, short-term faculty-led study abroad is expected to be the primary sorry, I'm just checking the chat. So during this first funding round, short-term faculty-led study abroad is expected to be the primary form of student mobility. So for development proposals, there are really two ways that can happen. The first is built towards launching your own faculty-led program. The second is participating in an existing study abroad or exchange opportunity as a transitional step, while your own faculty-led leadership, institutional capacity, and partnerships continue to develop. So those approaches aren't competing with one another. In some cases, they may actually complement each other. Sending your students to, on an existing program as a transitional step is a way to build your capacity, which is exactly what development proposals are about. That is the larger goal, is institutional capacity. I've been telling people that this whole initiative is, yes, it's a grant initiative, but it's really a capacity building initiative designed to look like a grant initiative. So the question isn't whether a partnership can deliver action or activity immediately. It's whether it's building the relationships, the structures, and the academic ownership needed to sustain that activity over time. Okay. So implementation, what does success look like? For implementation proposals, by the end of the project, we want to see a short-term faculty-led study abroad experience actually delivered, or a comparable short-term faculty-supervised mobility activity. Alongside that, um, we would generally expect to see faculty mobility completed, the recruitment process tested, partnership governance established, and future activities identified. And I want to be direct about the timeline because this is where implementation proposals often succeed or struggle. Even one of our most established partnerships, the Marshall and Bridge Valley partnership, found, and I'll see, I think Jason will uh, possibly add to this. They found that pricing, credit arrangements, and the program logistics continued to evolve well into the first year. And that's not a criticism, it's simply the reality of building a new international program. The lesson is that those pieces need to come together early enough to support student recruitment. If you can't tell prospective students by sometime in the fall semester, what the program costs, what credits they'll earn, how those credits will apply to their degree requirements, how financial aid applies. They're understandably going to be hesitant to commit. And the earlier those details are in place, the stronger your recruitment will be. In other words, an implementation project should demonstrate that the partnership can move from planning to delivery while also laying the groundwork for what comes next, all in this 1 year grant period. So development is real work. It's not a lesser path. And I want to spend a moment here because I think this is one of the most commonly misunderstood parts of the initiative. Team building, curriculum planning, partner identification, exploratory visits, governance decisions, and implementation planning are all substantive work. They're the work that makes long-term international partnerships possible. Development proposals are evaluated accordingly. Please don't undersell development simply because it produces different outcomes than implementation. In practice, development proposals that demonstrate honest self-assessment, institutional commitment, and a credible pathway towards implementation is often more competitive than an implementation proposal that overstates its readiness. The strongest proposals are the ones that honestly match the category they're applying to. Okay, the Marshall Bridge Valley Dundalk example. So I'm going to offer one example of how a partnership can mature over time, not because every institution should follow the same path, but because it illustrates how partnerships often evolve. The Marshall Bridge Valley Dundalk partnership began as a faculty-led proof of concept and gradually grew into a broader, more institutionally embedded collaboration. Rather than trying to build everything at once, each stage created the foundation for the next. One lesson that emerged from that experience was the value of developing academic leadership and administrative coordination together. As the partnership expanded, both the faculty work and the institutional support matured alongside one another. That won't be every institution's path, and it doesn't need to be. The broader lesson is that successful partnerships are usually built intentionally over time, with each stage preparing the way for the next. Unfortunately, Brian Hoey wasn't able to join us today because he's away with his family, but I'm very grateful that Jason Spencer from Bridge Valley could be with us to share the community and technical college perspective. So Jason, let me start with this, and then I'm going to let you talk. How did Bridge Valley first become involved in the partnership with Marshall and Dundalk? And looking back now, what do you think made the partnership successful from the Bridge Valley perspective?
Well, it was initially a federal ideas grant, and I believe that Marshall was looking into it first because Dr. Hoey had actually been pursuing a partnership with Ireland even before the grant became available. And when the opportunity came to apply what he was doing with this ideas grant, he jumped at the opportunity. Marshall reached out to our admissions department to find out who would like to help with this grant? We need a partner for this grant. And our admissions director helped write the Bridge Valley portion of the grant. And I was later approached because we had never done study abroad at Bridge Valley before. However, I was over our competitive robotics program and did all of our STEAM and STEM kind of outreach activities with K through 12 students in the area schools. So I was uniquely qualified because the grant specifically said they wanted to focus on STEM majors. So I was a STEM person. I was traveling with students already across the country for robotics. So combine those two things together, they thought Jason is uniquely qualified to take our students across the Atlantic to Ireland. So that's how I got kind of involved with the program. And um, what was the second part of your question? I forgot the second part.
What do you think has made the partnership successful from Bridge Valley's perspective?
Well, first of all, we pulled off our first ever study abroad program. That in itself was a success. We took 7 students the first year, and unfortunately, due to all the changes in the federal government and the grant only counting for 1 year, this past year we only had 1 student go, but we've still managed to have at least a single participant both years we've done it. The perspective from the community college is that we want to broaden the horizons of these students. I personally feel that STEM majors have the most to gain from something like this because a lot of their industries are internationally based and work across countries and borders. So I think like whether it's technology, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's some kind of engineering firm or something of that nature, these students have a lot to gain from just building those connections internationally. Also, unfortunately, STEM majors are also seen as being very insular and not outgoing. So they're not prone to actually building those connections and building those relationships. So this puts them kind of in a situation where they're not sitting at a computer. They're not just at a desk or doing a day-to-day job. They're out in the field. They're doing something and seeing a country and meeting new people and getting new perspectives. So I feel like that alone is an experience that they're going to remember the rest of their lives. They're going to be able to say they have international experience. And just building those relationships. And I'm happy to see that our relationship with Marshall and Dundalk is actually growing, and we are planning to expand how we're working with these international relationships and how our students are getting experiences with them, and how we can offer different course credit through the same model we've already been using.
Okay, great. Well, Jason, thank you. And if it's okay, if you can save your questions for Jason, and I'll be finishing here shortly, and then we'll just have time for questions and answers. So let me try to finish this. Thank you, Jason. Okay, can everybody see the slide? Yes, or they can't see it? Okay, so what reviewers actually reward? Um, put my, sorry, just, okay. So what, at the end of the day, uh, reviewers aren't looking for the most ambitious proposal. They're looking for the most credible one. They're looking for realism, institutional commitment that extends beyond one person, credible partnerships, achievable deliverables, an honest assessment of where the partnership actually stands, and a clear pathway toward implementation, even if that unfolds over multiple funding rounds. So the strongest proposals won't necessarily promise the most. They'll demonstrate the clearest understanding of where they are today and the most credible plan for where they're going next. One practical suggestion I'd offer is this: identify your faculty and administrative champions now and have them develop the proposal together. The faculty champion brings the academic vision. The administrative champion helps navigate institutional approvals, budgeting, logistics, and coordination. Those roles complement one another. One of the clearest lessons I've learned over the past several months is that partnerships are strongest when those two perspectives are involved from the beginning, rather than one being added after the proposal is already written. So what do I mean by institutional capacity? When we talk about institutional capacity, I'm not really talking so much about staffing and a budget. I'm talking about the systems and people that make a program work: registrar coordination, financial aid and credit processes, student support, faculty leadership, risk management, and transfer pathways. These all require coordination across multiple units within the university. And so what we don't mean is simply, we don't have we have people who like Ireland, who know a lot about Ireland. Enthusiasm absolutely matters. In fact, it often starts with enthusiastic people, but enthusiasm by itself is not institutional capacity. Institutional capacity is what allows a promising idea to become a sustainable program. So one implication of everything we've been talking about is that strong partnerships usually begin with a clear academic focus. It's very tempting to connect a proposal to culture, business, workforce development, heritage, tourism, economic development all at once. But the strongest proposals usually do the opposite. They begin with one well-defined academic area or academic idea, anchored in an actual degree program or discipline. Start narrow, build something that is coherent, fundable, and achievable. You can always expand the partnership over time. Trying to do everything in the first round usually doesn't make a proposal look more ambitious. It makes it harder for reviewers to understand exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Before you submit, your team should be able to answer a few basic questions. Who owns the academic side? Who owns the administrative side? What students are we trying to serve? What academic area are we focusing on? Why Ireland specifically? And finally, what will exist in December 2027 that doesn't exist today? The last question is especially important because it shifts the conversation Yes, the presentation will be shared, Jamie. So this last question is especially important because it shifts the conversation from what you hope will happen to what the grant will actually create. Every successful proposal, whether development or implementation, should be able to answer it clearly. Okay, a few things reviewers tend to notice. First, don't build a team that's larger than the work actually requires. Include the people who will genuinely contribute to the project, not everyone with a tangential Ireland connection. Second, don't make mistake of that personal and don't mistake personal enthusiasm for institutional readiness. One excited faculty member can be the beginning of a great partnership, but it isn't the same thing as institutional commitment. And finally, don't oversell implementation readiness when the proposal is genuinely development in nature. One of the quickest ways to weaken an otherwise strong proposal is to promise implementation deliverables that the partnership isn't yet ready to achieve. Throughout today's discussion, I've emphasized realism because reviewers reward it. Honest self-assessment almost always produces a stronger proposal than overstating your readiness. Okay, so I want to underline this because it's one of the questions I've been asked most often. A confirmed Irish partner is not required to apply. A confirmed partner and a credible strategy for identifying one are both entirely acceptable. My advice is to let your project direction guide your partner search. Start by asking what you're trying to build academically. Then look for the partner that's the best fit for that vision. Of course, some institutions already have strong Irish relationships, and that's a tremendous asset. The key is making sure the partnership and projects strengthen one another rather than trying to make one fit the other. Every proposal must include one West Virginia four-year institution and one West Virginia community and technical college, and one or more partner institutions in Ireland. As we just discussed, a confirmed Irish partner is not required at the time of application. A credible strategy for identifying, developing the right partner is equally acceptable, and I've included additional guidance on that in the FAQ, which I'll continue to build on. Each proposal must also identify a lead institution that will serve as the coordinating and submitting institution. Finally, I want to emphasize one point that reviewers will pay close attention to. The relationship between the four-year institution and CTC should reflect genuine collaboration. The expectation is a partnership where both institutions are actively helping shape and carry out the project, not simply one institution referring students to the other. Okay, and a few points here because this has generated quite a few questions. And it's yes, an institution may submit more than one proposal, but it cannot receive more than one award in the same funding category. In practice, that means we generally encourage institutions to focus on one strong development proposal and one strong implementation proposal rather than spreading effort across multiple proposals in the same category. Participating in different categories or partnering with different institutions on genuinely distinct projects remains entirely appropriate. I'll also mention something we're seeing emerge across the state. We've already begun seeing community and technical colleges being approached by more than one four-year institution. That's a natural outcome of a statewide initiative, and it isn't a problem in itself. What matters is that institutions communicate early and think strategically about how those partnerships fit together. If you're considering multiple proposals or multiple partnership opportunities, I'd encourage you to reach out before you submit. Reach out to the HEPC, to me, and we're happy to talk through the options with you and help you think about the combination that makes the most sense. One of the biggest misconceptions that I've encountered is that institutions think they have to have everything finalized before they submit a proposal. That's not what we're asking for. By August 14, what we need is a clear sense of direction, an honest assessment of your readiness, and a feasible, credible pathway forward. After awards are made, that's when detailed work continues. It's the post-award phase where we will be refining program design, working through the credit frameworks, finalizing budgets, strengthening institutional coordination, and developing the partnership in greater depth. This doesn't mean those issues are unimportant. It means they don't all have to be fully resolved by August 14. Implementation proposals should be already far enough along to demonstrate that they can realistically move into delivery. Development proposals are expected to use the grant period to build many of those pieces. I'm not going to spend much time on the individual budget categories because they're described in detail in the FAQ and the RFP. The main point is that the budget is intentionally flexible. Grant funds can support personnel and coordination, travel, student support, program costs, partnership development, supplies and materials, and other direct costs that are necessary to carry out the project. The one limit I do want to point out is that administrative and indirect costs are capped at 10% of the total award. If you're uncertain whether a particular expense fits, I'd encourage you to ask. It's much easier to have that conversation while you're developing the proposal rather than after it's submitted. I'll close with the overall timeline. Proposals are due Friday, August 14 at 4 p.m. Reviews will take place during August and September, with award notifications expected in fall 2026. We'll try to work as quickly as we can to announce the awards. For implementation awards, initial program activity is expected to begin in 2027, and all projects, both development and implementation, run through December 31, 2027. The reason I wanted to show the full timeline is that this is intended to be a development process, not a sprint to August 14. The proposal is the beginning of the work, not the end of it. And I want to I also wanted to let everybody know that you're not going to be getting rid of me after the August 14. My role doesn't end when proposals are submitted, and it doesn't end when awards are announced. My role isn't simply to administer an RFP. I'll continue working alongside institutions throughout the award period as a resource, a connector, and a thought partner as partnerships continue to develop. That may mean helping identify partners, working through implementation questions, connecting institutions with one another, or simply serving as a sounding board as new opportunities and challenges emerge. We are going to be learning together here. The reason I see the role that way is that this initiative isn't just about funding individual projects. It's about building a statewide network of partnerships, an ecosystem that can continue to grow over time. The proposals are important, but the long-term relationships we're building are ultimately the larger goal. So immediate next steps as you leave today's session, we're going to have a question answer here, but after the session is done, I'd encourage each institution to identify its next step. For some of you, that will mean preparing an implementation proposal. For others, it will mean submitting a development proposal. For some, it will mean continuing to build partnerships and institutional capacity for a future funding round. And for others, it may simply mean learning from this first cycle so you're ready when the timing is right. The important thing is that every institution reaches the same every institution doesn't have to reach the same destination this year. uh, and that you should be able to leave with a clear sense of what your next step should be. So this is my final slide, and four assumptions that are behind this initiative. And I'd like to leave this with you today. First, partnerships mature over time. Institutions do not need to have everything figured out by August 14. What matters is having a clear direction and a credible pathway forward. Second, partnerships move from proof of concept toward proof of system. The goal isn't simply to demonstrate that something can work once. The goal is to build something that becomes part of the way institutions work together over time. Third, honest readiness assessments produce stronger proposals. Some of the strongest proposals we fund may very well be development proposals because they recognize where a partnership is today and present a realistic pathway for where it's headed. And finally, success means building a healthy statewide ecosystem, operating at multiple stages simultaneously. Institutions will move at different speeds and enter this work in different ways. That isn't a weakness of this initiative. It's one of the defining design principles. So thank you all for your time this morning, for the thoughtful work you've already begun, and for your willingness to explore what this initiative can become. And I appreciate your participation, and I'd like to now open this up for questions.